Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive straight into the constitutional architecture of India's highest office, the President of India. Look, whether you're a student of Indian Polity, gearing up for your civil services exams, or honestly, just someone who wants to understand the inner workings of the world's largest democracy, this is for you. We're going to decode exactly how this massive office functions. We'll cover everything from the rather intense mathematics behind the election process, all the way to their sweeping emergency powers, and even that extremely rare constitutional emergency break we know as impeachment. Right off the bat, we've got to talk about the sheer prestige of this position. The Indian president isn't just a title. They are the head of the state. They are formally recognized as the very first citizen of India. But it goes way beyond just formal titles. The president acts as this vital, living symbol of the solidarity, unity, and integrity of the entire nation. So when you look at the union executive alongside the vice president, the prime minister, the council of ministers, and the attorney general, the president is absolutely the foundational pillar holding it all together. All right, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the head of state. Second, qualifications and election. Third, the vast powers. Fourth, the impeachment failsafe. And finally, a quick revision summary to lock it all in. Let's get into it. Section 1, the head of state and the strict constitutional bar for entry.
You know, you can't just wake up one day and decide to run for the presidency on a whim. The Constitution sets out some very strict hurdles. First off, you must be an Indian citizen. Second, you have to be at least 35 years old. Third, and this is a tricky detail that actually trips a lot of people up, you have to specifically meet the qualifications to be elected as a member of the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of parliament. And lastly, you absolutely cannot hold any office of profit under the central or state governments, or really any public authority. Oh, and if you happen to already be a member of the Lok Sabha, or Rajya Sabha, you have to give up that seat the second you step into the president's office.
Moving right along to Section 2, qualifications, election, and the really fascinating indirect voting system. So what's super interesting here is who actually gets to vote. The president is chosen through an indirect election, meaning regular citizens aren't casting these ballots. It's an electoral college. But who's in it? The electorate is made up entirely of the elected members of the Lok Sabha, the Rajya Sabha, the legislative assemblies of the states, and the union territories of Delhi and Puducherry. Notice I emphasized elected, because who is strictly out? Any nominated members. They don't get a say. And members of state legislative councils, they have absolutely zero role in this. This process is exclusively reserved for elected representatives. Okay, let's look at the math, because it's actually brilliant. In this election, a vote isn't just a simple value of 1. To make sure there's real demographic fairness, the value of an MLA's vote, a member of a legislative assembly, is tied directly to population. You take the total population of that specific state, divide it by the total number of elected members in that state's assembly, and then you multiply that result by 1 over 1,000. It sounds complex, but it basically ensures that the voting power of a state's representatives perfectly matches the actual population they represent. But then, how do you balance the collective power of all those states with the power of the central parliament? Well, here is the formula for the MPs. The value of a member of parliament's vote is figured out by taking the total combined value of the votes of all the MLAs from every single state and dividing it by the total number of elected members of parliament. It's just a deeply elegant piece of constitutional math that guarantees perfect parity between the combined states and the union parliament. So to quickly wrap up the mechanics, this whole thing runs on the principle of proportional representation using a single transferable vote, and it's all done via a secret ballot. Now, what happens if things get messy and there's a dispute? It goes straight to the Supreme Court of India. Their word is absolute and final. But get this, even if the Supreme Court declares a president's election void, the official acts they performed while sitting in the office, those actually remain legally valid. Pretty interesting, right? Once they're in, it's a 5-year term, and there's completely no cap on how many times a president can be reelected. All right, part 3, the vast powers. We're talking everything from executive actions to declaring national emergencies. Let's kick things off with executive powers. Literally every single executive action taken by the Indian government is done in the president's name. They are basically the grand architect of the state's administrative machinery. They appoint the attorney general, the comptroller and auditor general, the chief election commissioner, and state governors. They are also the ones forming vital national commissions for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other backward classes. They really build the structure of the government. Shifting over to legislative powers, their influence over parliament is huge. The president summons and prorogues parliament, and they actually have the power to dissolve the Lok Sabha. If the two houses are stuck in a deadlock, the president steps in and summons a joint sitting to figure it out.
They also get to nominate 12 members to the Rajya Sabha to bring in expert voices. But here's the real game changer. Under Article 123, the president can promulgate ordinances when Parliament isn't in session, based on the Cabinet's recommendation. That is a massive tool for legislation. Plus, they hold the system accountable by laying the CAG and UPSC reports right before Parliament. Financially speaking, think of the president as the ultimate constitutional gatekeeper of India's treasury. You literally cannot even introduce a money bill in Parliament without their prior recommendation. They're the ones who cause the union budget to be laid before Parliament each year. Need a demand for financial grants? You need their prerequisite recommendation first. And if a totally unforeseen crisis hits, the Contingency Fund of India is sitting securely right under their control.
And this authority spills right over into the judicial and diplomatic worlds too. Judicially, they appoint the Chief Justice of India, as well as the judges for both the Supreme Court and High Courts. They can ask the Supreme Court for advice, though, to be fair, that advice isn't binding. And crucially, they hold the very powerful right to grant pardons. On the diplomatic front, the president is literally the face of the nation. Every international treaty and agreement approved by Parliament is negotiated and concluded in their name, and they're India's formal representative at international forums.
To wrap up this section, we absolutely have to talk about the military and emergency powers. The president is the supreme commander of India's defense forces, appointing the chiefs of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. But it's during a crisis where this office holds truly staggering authority. The president manages 3 types of constitutional emergencies. You've got national emergency under Article 352, president's rule over the states under Articles 356 and 365, and financial emergency under Article 360.
Section 4, the impeachment failsafe, and how the Constitution ensures ultimate accountability. So how do you actually remove a sitting president? Well, there's only one condition that allows you to initiate impeachment, and that is a violation of the Constitution. But here's the wild part. From a legal perspective, the Indian Constitution never actually defines what a violation of the Constitution means. It is left entirely up to the judgment of Parliament.
Here's how this monumental process actually plays out. It can start in either house, but let's say it starts in the Lok Sabha. First, at least 1/4 of the members have to sign the impeachment charges. Then they have to give the president a strict 14-day notice. After that, the Lok Sabha has to pass the charges with a heavy 2/3 majority. If it passes, the charges go over to the Rajya Sabha for a formal investigation. And yes, the president has full rights to sit in on these proceedings. If the Rajya Sabha agrees with the charges and also passes them with that same 2/3 majority, the president is instantly removed from the highest office in the land. Finally, Section 5. Let's do a quick revision summary with our review matrix.
Okay, if you're prepping for an exam or just want to organize all of this in your head, lock this rapid-fire table into your memory. Status: the president is the head of state and first citizen. Minimum age: 35 years old. The electorate: strictly elected MPs and MLAs, no nominated members whatsoever. The voting math: it relies on proportional representation. And the sole ground for impeachment: violation of the Constitution.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. When you look at the massive scope of the president's executive, legislative, and emergency powers, and then you weigh that against the complex indirect election and the incredibly high bar for impeachment, is the president of India really just a symbolic figurehead like some people suggest? Or does this careful constitutional architecture actually make them the ultimate silent guardian of the Indian Republic? It's a huge question, and it's absolutely central to understanding Indian polity. Thanks so much for joining us on this explainer. Keep learning and keep asking those big questions.